is a presentation of Sertoba Media and Comey Media, Incorporated.
Wow, all of that was muted. Holy shnikes. I just noticed that it was muted. I apologize for that. So for the 2 minutes of silence, oh, wow, I apologize on that one. But no redos as we are live. But hey, welcome to episode 30 of Total Football Talk as we are back for another edition, episode 30. And as I was just saying while muted, unfortunately, Cole Johnson is not here today. You know, we are here for episode 30, but Cole Johnson will unfortunately not be here for the next 4 weeks as he's had some schedule changes at work and has to, adhere to that because that is number one, of course. And, I was not here last week. I was under the weather, so shout out to Kyle Nash. All of that I just said in a much better way while I was muted. So, again, I apologize for having that mute button clicked while the intro was playing. We got a lot to discuss today. Normally we go at 9 a.m. from 9 a.m. to noon, but because I was rolling solo today, I figured I'd start a little bit later because the show is not going to be as long as it normally is. The show is normally about 3 hours, sometimes 4, depending on what is on the slate for the day. I'm only guessing this will probably be about an hour and a half to 2 hours long today, which is why we started a little bit later than normal. So get your hats on, buckle those seatbelts, and get ready to rock and roll as the opening drive is right around the bend.
All right, let's go. We got trips right at 42, 989 on two. Ready? Ready.
Here with the opening drive, we got a bunch to talk about today when it comes to the things within the game of football. And we are just days away from the UFL kicking off. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, part owner of the UFL, is also just days away after that from wrestling in his first match in about 10 years, a little over 10 years in the WWE. So a big couple of weeks for the People's Champion as his organization, the UFL, now takes the field this Saturday and Sunday as we have games to discuss and break down on this show, as well as some more NFL news that has come about. So, as I said, buckle those seatbelts, get ready to rock and roll, and let's see what we got here to start this out. Now, with the opening drive, we're going to start this out by talking about the teams within the UFL. And, I want to start this out with the XFL conference, and that being the Arlington Renegades. led by head coach Bob Stoops. How stupendous is that? Old Bob Stoops remaining as the head coach of the Arlington Renegades. Looking what this man has done, 63 years old. People used to say that's old, but no, not anymore. Apparently, after what he's been doing, he won a championship last year in the XFL. Arlington Renegades won as they beat the DC Defenders in that championship game. And it was a great game to watch. I mean, me being a DC Defenders fan, seeing what they did last year throughout the XFL was definitely fun. It's definitely fun, especially when you think of the beer snake and everything else that came along with what they were doing over there in DC. Now, for Arlington, back to that as a team that we were just starting to talk about, again, led by Bob Stoops, man who led them to the XFL championship last year, was a national champion in college in the year 2000. You got to look at all this stuff. This man has a resume that's pretty remarkable, okay? You got to give him credit for what he has done in the game, and especially in his short time in the XFL. This is only his second year with the league, and already after year one, it's merged with the USFL and changed as we have 5 teams from one league merging with 3 teams from the other. And the USFL was out of organized sports for several decades as it blew up in everyone's faces after a few years in the mid-'80s. And then, of course, we had the short tenure of the USFL for only a couple years in this next go-around. So merging these 2 leagues together that were doing pretty mediocre by themselves, hopefully coming together as one, we'll have a pretty good year this year. And with the Arlington Renegades starting out with them, led by Bob Stoops as a head coach, got a pretty good chance to keep that momentum going. Now, the general manager is Rick Muller. Reggie Davis is their tight ends running backs coach. Jay Hayes is their defensive coordinator. Jonathan Heimbach is their offensive line coach. Old Chuck Long is the offensive coordinator / QB / wide receivers coach. Matt McMillan is the quality control coach. Marvin Sanders is the defensive backs coach. Bill Sheridan is the linebackers coach. And in relation to Steve Spurrier, the son, Scott Spurrier, is the special teams coach over there for the Arlington Renegades. In the stadium that they are playing at for their home advantage, when they do play at home, it's the Choctaw Stadium in Arlington, Texas. It's a pretty good stadium, too. If you guys have seen any action over there at that stadium, it's actually a pretty nice stadium. Me, not a huge fan of Texas, but I got to give credit where it's due. We need to look at what they are doing over there in Texas in organized sports, and the fact that the Arlington Renegades are the reigning champions of the XFL. You got to give credit where it's due. I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to say this right here, right now. Do not be surprised if a couple months from now, we're talking about the Arlington Renegades as the repeat champions for the first year of the new league UFL, but back-to-back champions, as last year's XFL championship would still count towards a back-to-back championship. So shout out to Cole Johnson for throwing this slate together today for me as we are here in action for episode 30 of Total Football Talk. And for that,
acknowledge me.
Absolutely. Had to get a quick water break in there for a second. That's why I clicked the acknowledge me. And some people may say,
now, that is absurd.
But I have this for you. Breaking news is I don't think anybody cared at all. And now we're back. So now after covering the Arlington Renegades' staff, we'll give more into the breakdowns of the team here later in the show once we get closer towards previewing this upcoming weekend's matchups. But as far as the Arlington Renegades, looking at what Bob Stoops, their head coach, has accomplished in college football and last year in the XFL, I like their chances. I really like the Arlington Renegades' chances this year. Now, moving on, I'd say with this next game right here, this next team, their game is a little bit questionable based on the fact that they're coming from the USFL to the UFL. It's hard to say, you go from XFL to USFL, just take the S out of there and you make it the UFL. I'm still having a hard time grasping all that. But right here, right now, talking about a USFL team that's coming on over to the UFL, that being the Birmingham Stallions, okay? Kind of look at this team right here and what they have accomplished right here. Looking at what they did last year, 8-2 in the USFL, okay? Doing what they did, becoming the team that they did, and reaching the heights that they did, you have to give them the credit, all the credit in the world for what they did over in the USFL. However, things are a little bit different now that you're in the UFL. You are now in a league that is a little bit different than what you're used to. Yes, you are the back-to-back defending champions of the USFL. But it's going to be a little bit harder, I think, to be a three-time champion, three-peat champion, and especially in a brand new formed league against other teams that are coming from that league that are pretty competitive. That being the team we just spoke about, the Arlington Renegades, and my DC Defenders that I will at least say wholeheartedly are there and they are ready to rock and roll. But the Birmingham Stallions are no slouch again, because when you have won back-to-back champions, you don't suck, okay? You're actually pretty good. Even though the people who are on that team were apparently, when it comes to the NFL, not good enough to play in the NFL, I kind of like what they're doing over here in these alternative leagues. It's a springboard to the NFL, yes, but it's also more reps for the players, because even if they were in the NFL, they wouldn't be getting these reps that they're getting while playing in the formerly known as the XFL and the formerly known as the USFL, now the lazily named UFL, even though I think instead of the United Football League, I'm still on record by saying they should be the Ultimate Football League, because that just sounds cooler, okay? You have to admit it, and I'm going to admit it. It sounds cooler. We got to be real with this right here. But considering the fact that the Birmingham Stallions have lost their leading running back, and I say this even though he came in there due to injuries to fill in and kind of got lucky with that 2022 championship and didn't really have so much luck last year. Bo Scarborough just retired as a member of the Birmingham Stallions. Yeah, he got back-to-back championships, really only contributing to the first one in 2022, but still, can't take the credit away from the man who did what he did. He was still contributed towards a championship. Looking at what the Birmingham Stallions have on paper as their head coach, Skip Holtz, Zach Potter at the general manager position. I don't even know how to say this man's name, but I'm going to give it a shot. Chris Benoit at special teams. Corey Chamblin for the secondary coach. You've got John Chavis as the defensive coordinator, linebackers coach. Oh, gosh, man. What is up with these names? I can't even say this next one. David. I'm going to just say, look that man's name up on the roster. You will find him and let me know how you feel about his name out there on that paper. I'm going to spell it for you just because I at least got to give him some justice out there. It's spelled like Deguglielmo. I still don't know how to say that. Look at it for what you will. I'll try my best out here in these streams, okay? Now, when it comes to the next name, this one's pretty easy. Bill Johnson, defensive line coach. Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones, the wide receivers coach. Philip Montgomery, the co-offensive coordinator / running backs / tight ends coach. Derek Riley, the assistant secondary coach. And the home stadium that they play out for Birmingham Stallions is at Protective Stadium. How fitting. Protective Stadium in Birmingham, Alabama. Shout out to Ryan McCarthy out here in the chat. Rest in peace, New Jersey Generals again. Yes, they did my man's team pretty bad with that New Jersey Generals team. Taking it away, and, honestly, it was a total
surprise, motherfucker.
And I did not like that. I did not like the fact that they took that team away because, I think that they did it to throw a jab at DJT. And I don't even want to get political on here because political is not my thing. I don't really follow politics, but we all know the fact that DJT was a part of that ownership group in the 80s. Even though he got $1 back, he could still be some way affiliated from afar in their minds. And they wanted to throw the jab back at DJT. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just throwing some wild shenanigans out there for you for this moment. And even to the point to where you have to bring this man up. This man would say this in this moment if he was right here. To all things. To when it comes to the rest in peace New Jersey Generals, to where it comes to all the blasphemous stuff I just said about former ownership of the team, he would say, "Damn!" Absolutely. I can't argue with that. You can't argue with that. And you know it, and I know it. Because if you're looking for shenanigans today, because I am by myself talking football, you got this.
You got the right one, baby.
You got the right one. Now, back to football, okay? We talked about Birmingham Stallions. We talked about the Arlington Renegades. Let's talk about another team that I was throwing some subtle hints about that I may or may not like, and that is the DC Defenders. Yes, they are closer to my home as I'm here in Virginia, hence the license plate behind me. But the Arlington Renegades had to beat a tough team in order to win that XFL championship last year. And looking at what the DC Defenders had put together between their coaching, I really like their coaching, and I'll break that down here in a second because the leadership, along with the play from the players on that team, everything just gelled last year. It was a fun year to watch. And knowing that they only had lost one game before that to the St. Louis Battlehawks, it was a pretty impressive year. I couldn't get upset with that whatsoever. I thought it was a pretty good year for the DC Defenders. And considering they brought back the majority of their staff as far as their coaching staff, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good year for them, considering they were able to retain Reggie Barlow throughout the merging of the league, okay? They still were able to bring him back in DC. I really like him as a head coach over there, along with Von Hutchins, general manager. Made some great moves last year. And Vernon Dean, the defensive backs coach as well. You got Fred Keiss as the offensive coordinator. And I hope I said that correctly because it sounds like a pretty cool name. Sean Anderson, the wide receivers coach. Russ Ehrenfeld is the offensive line coach. Deion Harris is the linebackers coach. You got Shannon Harris. Not sure if they're related as the quarterbacks coach, but I'm going to find out. Believe me, I'm going to find out. And we will revisit this next week on Total Football Talk. When it comes to Jeremy Watkins, he's the defensive line coach. And, of course, a name that you all know very, very well. And that's Greg Williams with 2 Gs. Actually, technically, 3 Gs. He was 3G before 3G was a thing. Greg with 3 Gs in the Greg. Only an R and an E is in between 3 Gs. Greg Williams, the defensive coordinator for the DC Defenders. We already know about his rap sheet when he was in the NFL and Bounty Gate and all that stuff that he had as a part of New Orleans Saints. The man is a Super Bowl champion. Can't take it away from him as far as a defensive coordinator. But it's time this year for the DC Defenders to build on what they had established last year. I hope that they don't have a relatively sophomore slump because this is the third rendition of the XFL. Technically fourth if you want to count the merger, okay? But if we don't really count the merger because they haven't folded or anything, this is like the third rendition of the XFL. Third rendition of this team potentially, because you got to look at what happened in the year 2000 when they had the XFL, then the year 2020 when they brought it back. The pandemic killed it, all sorts of stuff. The Rock and his ex-wife take over the league. We come back in 2023, and well, we have what we have, okay? I like what the DC Defenders were able to pull off. And it hasn't been that long since last year's season was about. So if you look at everything as a whole, considering the moves that they made, they didn't lose a whole lot, they didn't really gain a whole lot either. They're about the same as what they were last year. So if you liked what you saw on paper, unless the rest of the league just got really, really, really good or something, I think we're going to see another decent year out of the DC Defenders this year. I really like what they were able to pull off in this type of merger between the USFL and the XFL, and seeing what we were able to get out of this team. Not just this team, but the other teams that we've got here. Another team that comes on over we got right here is, well, no. This team actually stays the same. Houston Roughnecks. Houston Roughnecks are in the USFL conference, as it was moved on over to. Got CJ Johnson as the head coach over there for the Houston Roughnecks, along with Lionel Vital as the general manager. Garrett Chachi. We call him Chachi. Garrett Chachi is the person in position over there in the special teams running backs division of their coaching. I'm just going to call him Chachi. I kind of like Chachi. If you like Chachi, let me know. Or if you think it's a total... let me know too. Just let me know. It could be as big of an as the way I started the show on mute for the first 2 minutes. Okay. If you are just tuning in, you can go ahead and skip the first 2 minutes because it wasn't that good. It was not that good because it was muted. Now, back to this. When we look at old Chachi as the special teams running backs coach over there for the Houston Roughnecks, and you got Bob Connolly as the offensive line coach, Kawan Drake is the defensive line coach, you got Jordan Higgins as the tight ends coach, Brett Maxey is the defensive backs coach, Eric Price is the offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach, Zach Shaggy is the assistant secondary coach, and Chris Wilson as a defensive coordinator / linebackers coach. You know, this team is playing at TDECU Stadium in Houston, Texas, a stadium that my man Cole Johnson knows very well, a stadium that I'm sure that he has either passed by at some point or maybe even been in attendance at. When he comes back to the show in 4 weeks, I'm going to have to ask him if he has been at this stadium right here, the one with 5 letters before the word stadium. I mean, it's true. I just thought it would be a good little thing to throw that unit on in there real quick. But, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that there's something different about the name right there? TDECU Stadium? It's a little different. It's a little unaverage, a little unordinary. I'm still trying to figure it out. I think it could be a cool name. It is a cool name. But at the same time, sometimes we have to testify whether we agree or we disagree with the potential something to the notion of this.
Oh, my brother, testify!
Somewhat. Yes, we do have some shenanigans here in this show because I kind of have to have a filler, as I'm usually used to having a guest on here, whether it's a guest or a Cole. It's a little bit different doing this show today by myself. And it's the reason why we started a little bit later than normal. Normally this show is going by 9:30 at the latest in the morning. And today I started at 11:30 because of this factor alone, because of doing this show solo today. There's absolutely no way that I would be able to do this show for 3 hours. And in some cases, like we have gone 4 hours by myself. I cannot sit here and talk for that long. I mean, I could, but the agenda at hand is there's not enough material to talk for 3 hours. So today could get me till about 1:30. I'll give you my best shot to get past an hour and a half, and potentially 2 hours as we fill some time right here in this moment.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Absolutely. Now, back to the show. So we've covered the first 3 teams of this league right here. Well, the first 4 teams, because we've gone through the Houston Roughnecks. Let's move on over to another team that was retained from the USFL that will also be in the USFL conference, and that is the Memphis Showboats. The Memphis Showboats, looking back at what they did last year in the USFL, they were 5-5 in the South Division. Out of all the teams, you got to look at, I was surprised that they kept the Memphis Showboats, as a whole. I mean, not too much, because you look at the North Division between the Maulers, the Panthers, the Stars, and the Generals. They had either a 4-6 record for the first 3 seeds or a 3-7 record for the 4th seed. So when you got to look at that, when you got people like Ryan McCarthy out there who had this one comment then dipped on out of here, you got to look at the fact that 3-7 shouldn't garner you to be in this new league. Okay. They're like, I have to look at that and actually agree with their decision on keeping the New Jersey Generals out of this newly formed league. And look at the teams that they did bring on over, like the Memphis Showboats, who were 5-5. It's a lot more respectable than a 3-7 record. The Birmingham Stallions, looking at what they did, 8-2 record right there. Can't get mad at that either. I mean, you really can't. And the Michigan Panthers, yeah, I mean, they were 4-6. So I guess, I don't know, but at the same time, I feel like the Michigan Panthers did not deserve it over the Breakers. Okay. The Breakers, they had a pretty decent year last year, going at 7-3. And I can't get but so excited to see a Michigan Panthers team when they didn't play as well as the Breakers did. But you can look at the division they were in. You can look at their schedule. There were other things that could have been a little bit more propelling to getting them to the furthest point that they were at, okay, to the 7-3 record in 10 games, okay? So overall, I cannot stress enough when it comes to this situation right here, the USFL merging with the XFL, bringing in the Memphis Showboats, I'm just not that excited about seeing this team in this league, and I don't know if they are going to actually make a whole lot of noise this year. 4-6, it's okay. But you're playing against a little bit better competition in the XFL in my eyes. So what could have been a 4-6 record last year could potentially be a 2-8 record this year. We'll talk more about that later on, especially in the coming weeks. But right now, I'm going to say that it's a mediocre move. And looking at what this team has right here with the Memphis Showboats, you got John DiFilippo. I think DiFilippo is the head coach. I don't know how to say his name. I might have to get a little bit better with that. Dennis Polian is the general manager. The Polians have got a pretty prestigious name when it comes to working in front offices of football. And if he's anything like his pops, he may do a pretty good job over there for the Memphis Showboats between now and the end of his tenure for that team. Looking at the rest of this team, Kirk Dahl is a special teams running backs coach. Carnell Lake as a defensive coordinator / defensive backs coach. Doug Martin is the offensive coordinator / wide receivers coach. Doug Martin sticks out to me back from his days in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a player. Paul Pasqualani is the linebackers coach. Stephen Thompson as the assistant linebackers coach. The run game coordinator / offensive line, Jim Turner. Tight ends coach, TJ Vernieri. And the home stadium they are playing at is at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium in Memphis, Tennessee. Okay? So even though you've got what you had in the 4-6 record from last year, I have a strong feeling this team is going to regress this year. There's not a huge amount of big names, if any, on this roster. The biggest name that I see within the roster of the coaching / front office is Dennis Polian, and Dennis Polian still has a long way to go to live up to his, his genealogy. You cannot say that one Polian is going to make it the greatest for them all. Okay, when it comes to his dad, his grandfather, whatever, and now down to Dennis. Doesn't mean he's going to be great either. And he's in the UFL. So it's not like he's in the NFL as a GM. He may or may not have a bit of the spark that old Ed had. We'll see. We'll see if old Dennis can do it. I don't know. You tell me. I'm not sure. So,
Oh, my brother, testify.
facts. Now let's move on to the Michigan Panthers. Okay, as we were talking about them a little bit just a minute ago, but looking at this team right here, you got head coach Mike Nolan. If you remember Mike Nolan, he was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers a long time ago. A very young Mike Nolan at that time, but he is now the head coach of this team known as the Michigan Panthers. And, he spent his time in the NFL, not only as the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers back in the day, but, he was the defensive coordinator for the Broncos after that, defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins, the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, San Diego Chargers linebacker coach, New Orleans Saints linebackers coach, defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys during the pandemic year in 2020. Took a couple of years off, but last year was the head coach of the Michigan Panthers during their 4-6 record year, and has been retained by the team and by the league to be the head coach of the Michigan Panthers for the 2024 season. Now, in the USFL, in the postseason, he has an 0-1 record. And last year, again, he was 4-6 during the regular season. Looking at his NFL record, he was 17-36 during the regular season. Okay. And overall, with a 321 winning percentage at 17-36, it's just not great numbers to me. I was very surprised when the USFL brought in Mike Nolan as the head coach last year for that team. I mean, what has Mike Nolan really done, in my opinion? What has he really done to establish himself as head coaching material for this league? You tell me. Let me know here in the comments, as you guys are being kind of quiet out here right now, but I see you out there. I can see you out there on Twitter and Twitch watching. Nobody's watching on YouTube right now, which is very, very, unusual, but part of that could be because of the time that we started. There is no description for this video, and StreamYard was not allowing me to put a description in this video, so it was very, very disappointing that I could not do that and get this all set up for us to get this thing rocking and rolling today. But next week we'll be in a little bit better shape in the preparation of that. But now back to this. When we look at the Michigan Panthers, Mike Nolan, again, looking at his head coaching record, I don't see the Michigan Panthers as a threat at all this year. Steve Kozar, the general manager for the Michigan Panthers, is definitely someone that you can look at with that last name. Okay, you got to look at what Bernie Kosar did. Bernie Kosar was a big name over there in Cleveland land, as he was the quarterback for the then Cleveland Browns. Then they kind of left the league a little bit, and now they're back to prominence over there in the NFL, as they've had some better years ahead of them and behind them. Last year was a pretty decent year for Cleveland. Look at what Joe Flacco did. Now you're bringing that spark over here to this team for the UFL, and that being the Michigan Panthers. Will he do anything of difference over there? Probably not, because Mike Nolan is the head coach. Colin Bowers, the defensive coordinator / defensive line coach. You got Marcel Bellafuel It's the best way I can say it, as the offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach. Jerron Fairman as the special teams wide receivers coach. Tim Holt as the offensive line coach. Brock Marion as the defensive backs coach. Jordan Pavlizin as the running backs coach. Christian Runza as the linebackers coach. Gary Watkins as the tight ends coach. And to keep things interesting for this, as an NFL stadium will be used for the Michigan Panthers field. And that will actually be at Ford Field, home of the Detroit Lions, which will be nice to see the Michigan Panthers playing there yet again. So looking at that, that's some pretty good news. We got an NFL team as the home field sighting for the Michigan Panthers. Sorry, guys, but doing a show that normally has 2 people on it and doing all this talking, you may see me taking some water breaks here and there, especially during the show and especially during the commercial break, but we are still a ways away from the commercial break. So looking at the Michigan Panthers, again, I don't see them as a threat for this year. What I do see is they will actually have a pretty cool stadium to play in. You know, they might not be a threat, but at least they'll have a pretty good stadium to play in. There's only 2 teams left to cover here for this opening drive when it comes to the UFL. And this next team last year definitely underperformed. A team that, some would say they were pretty surprised to see them being retained. You know, the Seattle Sea Dragons had a 7-3 record, okay? And yet the San Antonio Brahmas, who had a 3-7 record, were retained over the Seattle Sea Dragons. So looking at this situation right here, in the fact that I'm breaking down a team that I'm not excited to be breaking down when it comes to the San Antonio Brahmas, the only really reason that this team is still in the league is because Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is, old school nickname back in the day during the Attitude Era of the WWE was he was the Brahma Bull. Okay. And I think that's the biggest reason why he wants to keep it, is because it's lineage to him, his character, and his family. And I can't get so upset about that, but you have to look at the people that you kind of cut in the process. In this situation, you bring in a head coach who was the head coach of the Houston Roughnecks last year. And they made the moves that they made because, again, the way that this league is set up, I mean, the league owns the teams, so you can move around whoever they want. And even though Wade Phillips is, from Texas and likes Texas a lot, he's still there. He's still in San Antonio, but they changed things up as far as their head coaching over there, as the Houston Roughnecks have C.J. Johnson as their head coach that we talked about earlier. And you have old Wade being moved over to the San Antonio Brahmas, because the problem with the Brahmas last year is they were lacking leadership. And the Houston Roughnecks last year weren't lacking leadership, as they were 7-3 and led the South Division in the XFL. So I think the hope is that Wade Phillips can turn things around like he was able to provide for the Houston Roughnecks and give them a good head coach there. I think The Rock is hoping, even though The Rock's not out here saying it, he still has a hand in this stuff. Might be a little bit more quiet of a hand right now because of what he's doing professionally with other obligations, including WWE and WrestleMania. But I think The Rock had a hand in moving Wade Phillips just from one part of Texas to the other, because he didn't want to see his namesake, which is, you can honestly say that the Brahmas team is The Rock's namesake, go down in flames. Okay. And it did. Last year it did. It was 3-7 as a team, as a unit, and was not a team that you or I would particularly want to watch. We would not want to watch an absolute team that was, I would say, spearheaded by these dumpster Pelican-esque players right here, as they were I would say, the third dumpster Pelican, the one on the left-hand side in the back, standing on top of that Walmart trash bag, that would be what I would say would be the San Antonio Brahmas last year. Absolutely. And you know.
You like that? You like that?
Oh, you do. You do. Hopefully you do. That's why you're still here watching this. Okay. Now, when it comes to the San Antonio Brahmas, the rest of their team, they got Mark Lillibridge as the general manager. Okay. Chris Achuff as the defensive line coach. Derek Berry as the linebackers coach. They've got Andre Garode as the offensive line coach. They've also got Peyton Pardee as the wide receiver special teams coach. And not related to Willis Reed, Will Reed is the defensive coordinator over there now for the San Antonio Brahmas. Okay? So, looking at this situation right here, looking at this team right here, there's only a couple more things that we can cover when it comes to the people on this team. Now, AJ Smith is the offensive coordinator over there for this team. Marvin Williams is the running backs coach. In their home stadium, you got to look at and get excited about and get hyped about is the Alamo Dome over there in San Antonio, Texas. Okay. The Alamo Dome, a place with a huge amount of history in the state of Texas. Okay. So looking at this right here, looking at this team, you have to say to yourself, will this team be competitive? Is there a chance that this team right here actually does something special within the confines of this league? We'll have to see, because last year 3-7 was not anything to bat an eye at. I think with Wade Phillips and the adjustments over there within the coaching tree, that we're going to see something potentially pretty special. And I think that we're going to see, I would say, better than 5-5. Because if Wade Phillips can do what he did last year with the Houston Roughnecks, okay, and yes, it's still in the same state, it's still in Texas, he doesn't have to move that far. He might even still be able to just get in the car and drive to where he's coaching at now. Who knows? Depending on where the man lives. I don't know where he lives, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you, because that's not the whole point of Total Football Talk, giving out addresses and getting you to go to his house, shake his hand. No, if you want to run into him at a CVS, if he even goes to a CVS, then that's up to you to bump into him on your own accord, at your own time. And most people will probably look at this and say, what are you even talking about? That's
terrible.
Because the man doesn't go to CVS. And this is Total Football Talk. You know.
You like that? You like that?
I miss Cole. Cole will be back in 4 weeks. But for today, hopefully only, I'm running solo. So as things were kind of thrown around last minute, and it was tough to find somebody to fill in. And next week we should be fine. But today you just got me. You got some shenanigans. This is like a mixture of D. Willie in the evening meets football talk. Total football talk. So now we've gone through 7 of the 8 teams. We got one more to go through. And that is a team that made some noise last year, especially with the NFL quarterback, former NFL quarterback, then went back to the league last year, but then came back again in A.J. McCarron for this 2024 season. You got Anthony Beck as the head coach over there for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Dave Bowler is the general manager over there for the Battlehawks. You got Donnie Abraham as the defensive coordinator over there. Martin Bayless, no relation to Skip, thankfully, as the secondary coach. Kyle Caskey is the running backs coach / special teams. Chris Claiborne as the linebackers coach. You got Leroy Glover as the defensive line coach. Phil McGuigan is the wide receivers coach. And the stadium that they will be playing at again will be the Dome at America Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, it's a good stadium. I can't speak any ill will about the stadium over there, but I think the biggest thing that we saw not only last year, but when they first came back with the XFL in 2020 is how much the state of Missouri misses having NFL football or just having professional football in general. That's the best way I can really put it. They are taking very well to the St. Louis Battlehawks professional team over there for the XFL, now in the UFL. They did at least through last year. So we're hoping, or at least those of us who are fans or covering the sport in itself, are hoping that this continues this year. Because the scene watching, it basically gives hope to the NFL, to the NFL fans in the area, that they might be able to bring a team back to St. Louis. Maybe not the Rams, but maybe make another team to come on over there. But I feel like if they do that, they're going to have to create two teams to balance out the scheduling of the entire league in itself over there in the NFL. So, but then again, you look back to 2015, 2014, 2013, those years where the attendance in St. Louis was dipping, from 13 on up, until they relocated to LA. The Rams attendance was going down, but you have to look at that more as the team wasn't really competitive. So if you had a competitive team out there like the St. Louis Battlehawks, who definitely last year were a very competitive team, they were 7-3, led by AJ McCarron. They did great. Okay, so 7-3 is very competitive. When you have a competitive team, you're going to have butts in the seats. That's exactly what you got out of this St. Louis Battlehawks team. So if things continue to trend upward for this team, I think that's the concoction that you need over there in St. Louis. You not only need a professional team, but you have to have a competitive team. Because you look at when the St. Louis Rams had the greatest show on turf, okay? That was in 99. And we're going to go back to the NFL for a second, but just for a history lesson. You go back a few years before that, when they had the bus, Jerome Bettis as their running back. Before they started, before they traded him to Pittsburgh, before they made the moves they made to, enhance their team, trading for Marshall Faulk after the 98 season, the things that St. Louis Rams did in between all that, from not really good in like the mid 90s to really good by the end of the 90s, you have to look at the moves that they made. You have to look at what they've established over there for the St. Louis Battlehawks now as a pretty decent team. However, my point to this is if you don't have a team that's competitive in that market, you're not going to be able to draw the fans. You're not going to be able to draw the interest of the fans to come watch, whether it's live in person or even in those TV markets in that area to watch a team that's not good. And I'll give you an example of here in Virginia, right? Here in Virginia, a good portion of people here are fans of the Washington Commanders, right? Or formerly known as the Redskins. Look at my license plate behind my head. Yes, I am a fan, okay? However, when it comes to the overall consensus, the fact that this team has not really played well for the majority of the past 30 years. They've had some flashes in the pans here, like the 2005, the 2007, the 2012 seasons, where they give you hope throughout the season, but then like the first round of the playoffs, they're out of there. The 1999 season's another one too, and I think the 96 and 94 season. So there's like, 11%, if that, of the time they're good or mediocre good. The rest of the time they're absolutely terrible, playing like a bunch of dumpster Pelicans, probably the number one dumpster Pelican potentially in the NFL at times. And at times they're middle of the pack. But my whole point to that is when you have that, attendance is going to go down. Until last year, they were okay starting the year out, then they got bad. But They had sellout crowds for the majority of the year, which is something they had not done in many years over there in FedEx Field. And my whole point to that is you got to look at St. Louis now. Okay. St. Louis for years after the greatest show on turf, after they went back to the Super Bowl in 2001 and lost. You had the Mark Bolger years after Kurt Warner where you had a few decent years, but you never got back to the height of greatness that the team had experienced in the 99 and 2001 seasons, winning one Super Bowl, but going to two. And you saw the downfall of the St. Louis Rams, not only as a team, but the fans in attendance, as they could barely get 25% of the people to fill the stadium. They could barely get 25% of the stadium filled, is what I should say. So looking at this as a whole, looking at the whole entire perspective in St. Louis, if you bring a competitive team to the area, then you can field an NFL team in the future. However, if it's mediocre to subpar to absolutely sucking, there's no point in even putting the effort into bringing a team over there, because you're going to put more effort into bringing the team over than the amount of effort that you're going to put into the team to construct a good one. Then there's no point. It's a waste of time. It's like you look at the expansion teams from the 90s, the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay? In a short period of time, the Jaguars became a pretty good relevant team after their first or second season, I believe, getting to the AFC Championship game. Mark Brunell, scrub left-handed quarterback, okay? This is a lot of talent throughout the UFL right now between the XFL and the USFL merging. You got a bunch of Mark Brunells out there. And there's a diamond in the rough within one of those Mark Brunells. It's going to show something special. And we saw some things happen last year with the XFL. USFL, a couple little flashes, but the USFL I just wasn't that excited about. I was not excited about USFL whatsoever. But now with the merger between the two leagues, and you got a few teams coming over from the USFL, I'm starting to get a little bit excited. Because me, as a fan of football, just loving the game to its best into the entirety, I love having spring football back. Because Canadian football, we'll get more into that in the coming months, as CFL will be coming back soon. But even the rules of the game and the way to set up the field is a little bit different. This is the closest thing that we're going to get to the NFL in the springtime ever. And will it have the amount of fans and seats as the NFL does? No. Will it be as flashy and great in certain areas as the NFL? No. But if you want hard-nosed football that's going to still give you the entertainment and the joy for the love of the game, then you have it right here. And I love baseball too. So the mixture of being able to watch some baseball and not NFL and professional football in the same day, along with seeing a few names out there that you're used to seeing from when they shine at the brightest of lights in college football, or when they tried to hack it in the NFL, couldn't quite get there. Or for the third best option, you could be seeing all of that culminated into a potential opportunity to springboard them back to the NFL to get one last shot and potentially a decent opportunity at success in the NFL. So there's a lot that comes in to the XFL and the USFL's merger, and especially with the St. Louis Battlehawks, as again, you got the Gradkowskis in there too. You got Bruce Gradkowski, a former NFL name, and his brother Gino Gradkowski as part of this coaching staff. Bruce is the offensive coordinator. You got Gino as the offensive line coordinator. I feel like they're going to be able to help this team out when it comes to the leadership that must be necessary to help them advance, because their record last year was pretty respectable in the XFL. Their record again last year was 7-3, and they have the potential to improve that. Now, my personal pick, I would like to see the DC Defenders get a little bit better from 9-1. And you're probably saying, well, Drew, how do you get better than 9-1? You win 10 games. You win 10 games. And that's how you get better. You go undefeated the regular season. And then you run the table in the playoffs. However, I'd rather see you go 9-1 or potentially 8-2 and win the whole thing. So If you got to lose a game or two during the regular season to get you, shook up enough to win the whole thing, then I'm cool with that too, brother. So, looking at this, I think the biggest competition the USFL is going to have, or the UFL is going to have, when it comes to some of these teams, is with themselves. Because let's now that we've gone through the entirety of the teams and their coaching staff and where they're playing, okay, as I believe I covered the St. Louis's, the Dome in America Center in St. Louis. Yeah, I did say that. And yeah, I've already gone through the entire team's list. Now let's go ahead and give into a little bit of a deeper dive into my notes for what we should expect in the United Football League this year. So let's go and start with the Birmingham Stallions. You got Skip Holtz as two-time USFL champions, returning not just their head coach, but the key members on both the 2022 and 2023 title team. Among them are star wideouts Victor Bolden, quarterback Jamar Smith, and tight end Jace Sternberger. Okay, keep those names fresh in your head because you're going to hear them more throughout this season, okay? However, the Stallions left the first dispersal draft without the 2023 USFL MVP, quarterback Alex McGough, and the league's best kicker, Brandon Aubrey. They must think they got some special talent on this team, y'all. Let's keep on going. Still, no team has been as dominant as the Stallions over the last 2 years in the USFL, winning 21 of 24 games and going undefeated in the USFL playoffs. Former Kansas State quarterback Adrian Martinez projects as the day one starter. In 2022, he helped lead the Wildcats to a Big 12 title while passing for more than 2,800 yards and rushing for more than 500, with 27 total touchdowns. The addition of former Philadelphia star Channing Stribling makes the secondary formidable. Stribling recorded 7 interceptions in 2022 and 8 over the past 2 years. The number of all USFL players selected is 6. Noteworthy players: Adrian Martinez, quarterback, Kansas State. Chris Orr, inside linebacker, Wisconsin. Scooby Wright, inside linebacker, Arizona. Jamar Smith, quarterback, Louisiana Tech. Willie Yarberry, defensive line, Wake Forest. Amari Rogers, wide receiver, Clemson. We got Channing Stribling, the cornerback from Michigan. Old Jay Sternberger, the tight end from Texas A&M. Calvin Ashley, the offensive tackle from Auburn. Victor Bolden, the wide receiver from Oregon State. And JoJo Tillery, the safety from Wofford. That's just some of the names that you can look back at the noteworthy players that are returning to this team, in a team that should make some noise here, going from the USFL to the now lazily formed UFL. Should be called the Ultimate Football League, but again, you will hear me say that multiple times. Let's move on to the next team. Next team here, Arlington Renegades. Despite going just 4-6 last season, old stupendous Bob Stoops, Renegades rode into the XFL playoffs and proceeded to win the XFL championship. The return of quarterback Luis Perez, who finished with the 4th most passing yards in the XFL with 1,636 through 10 games, already gives Stoops' squad continuity. Other teams will lack at the most important position on the field. You have to look at that right there too. Continuity is a big thing out here on this field. Perez is the only quarterback to feature in the playoffs of both leagues and one of just 2 returning starters, along with the Stallions quarterback Jamar Smith, to a championship team at that position. Former All-USFL linebacker Donald Payne returns to the Renegades and remains the only player in either league to record a 100 tackle, which was 117 last year, season as a Houston Gambler in 2022. Gene Harris, the leader across both leagues in interceptions last year with 5, also returns to Arlington. The number of all XFL and USFL players that were selected are 3. And the noteworthy players are Luis Perez, quarterback, Texas A&M Commerce. Deontay Burnett, wide receiver, USC. Devontae Lambert, defensive tackle, Auburn. Lindsey Scott, quarterback, Incarnate Word. Colin Schooler, linebacker, Texas Tech. Holton Ahlers, quarterback, East Carolina. Vic Beasley, linebacker, Clemson. And Cam Brown, defensive back from Ohio State, along with old Donald Payne that we talked about earlier, the linebacker from Stetson. Let's move on to a team that I know pretty well, okay? And that being the DC Defenders, okay? DC finished with a 9-1 record in the 2023 regular season and is undefeated 9-0 at Audi Field dating back to 2020. Opponents might fear the Beer Snake, but Defenders fans might fear heading into 2024 without XFL Offensive Player of the Year Jordan Tiamu behind center. After the first dispersal draft, Tiamu isn't listed on any UFL roster, which is very weird. Spring football is about transactions, though, with the CFL signing free agents, all while players are figuring out their 2024 futures with the 2023 NFL regular season coming to an end. But 2023 XFL Coach of the Year, Reggie Barlow, has 2.5 months to identify his starter. Wrong, because we are now at the point of the week where the games are only a few days away, pretty much. We're only 4 days away from it. All these notes were made months ago. Abram Smith, who ran for 791 yards and 7 touchdowns in 10 games, was the XFL's leading rusher. Okay, he will be back. So you have that at least. You have your leading rusher back. Quarterback position is definitely a tough position to have to replace. And considering that they've had the past 2.5 months to figure this out, I think we're going to be in for a good ride this weekend, or it's going to be a pretty bumpy ride considering the fact that you lost your star quarterback in Jordan Tiamu. But we'll have to see how that goes here in the upcoming weeks. The number of all XFL players selected are 5 for this team right here, and that's Leon Fornadell, offensive guard James Madison, Davin Bellamy, defensive end in Georgia, Michael Joseph, the defensive back from Duquesne. You got Abram Smith, the running back from Baylor, and Trent Harris, the linebacker from Miami. Reggie Northrup, the linebacker from Florida State, is returning. And other than that, the DC Defenders were a little quiet during this offseason. So it's a good or bad thing. They're either going to roll with the best of what they got from their returning players from last year, or we're going to see a pretty big downfall this year, just to keep it real. So as much as I was hype at the beginning of this show about the DC Defenders, maybe switching gears a little bit. But once we get to the end of the show where I start talking about the preview of the games for this upcoming weekend, you get more of my answer at that point. So moving on to the Houston Roughnecks. Curtis Johnson's Gamblers missed the playoffs going 5-5, but looked impressive down the stretch in the strong South Division. Though the Gamblers rebranded as the Roughnecks, the XFL franchise, the 2024 Roughnecks, used the 2023 Gamblers roster to select protected players and were allowed to select additional players in the dispersal draft from the USFL's pool of players and not the XFL's pool of players. And they managed to pull out nearly twice as many all USFL or all XFL players as the next closest franchise with 9. One more reason the Roughnecks rate highly is because they are returning a starter at quarterback at Kenji Bahar, who became a better player as the season progressed and featured one of the league's most talented receiving corps, led by returning pass catcher Justin Hall. Hall caught 47 passes for 515 yards with 4 touchdowns in 10 games. Despite this, the Roughnecks returned to the 2023 USFL Offensive Player of the Year and running back Mark Thompson, two-time All-USFL defensive tackle Toby Johnson, and the 2022 USFL Offensive Player of the Year in Chris Odom. Number of All-USFL players selected is 9. It's a lot of players, but we're going to go over them right now. Mark Thompson, running back of Florida. Adam Rodriguez, defensive end of Weber State. Toby Johnson, defensive tackle, Georgia. Isaiah Henney, wide receiver, Sacramento State. Justin Hall, wide receiver, Ball State. Paul Adams, offensive tackle from Missouri. And Manny Bunch, the safety from Tulsa. There's a lot of additions on this team from the Houston Gamblers, reincarnated as the Houston Roughnecks. It's going to be interesting to see if they are going to play up to the hype, because they are pretty well hyped up right now. And they don't even have their head coach from last year when they had old Wade Phillips as their previous head coach. But we won't even dive too much further into that because talked about that earlier in the show. Looking at our next team, the Memphis Showboats. Now under the leadership of former New Orleans Breakers coach John DiFilippio. I'm probably butchering his name, but there it is. The Showboats returned to special teams player of the year, Derek Dillon, who also owns the record for the longest kickoff return for a touchdown in pro football history, and also added one of the USFL's better quarterbacks in Case Cookus. New additions to the Showboats roster include two-time All-American and two-time national champion linebacker Dylan Moses, as well as the three-time 1,000-yard rusher and former Oklahoma standout Kennedy Brooks. The number of all USFL players selected for this team are 5. They are Derek Dillon, wide receiver, LSU. Jerron Jones, offensive tackle, Notre Dame. DJ Daniel, cornerback in Georgia. Vinny Papale, wide receiver at Delaware. And you know what? While we are live on this show, because I am very, very, very interested in knowing if this guy right here is in relation to Invincible, because Invincible was a movie that had a guy by the name of Papale in there. And yes, he is the son of former Eagles receiver Vince Papale, whose career was the base of the 2006 film Invincible. So old Vince Papale had a kid, Vincent Joseph, old VJ, who is now a wide receiver for the Memphis Showboats and has spent the majority of his career between the CFL and the USFL, playing in the CFL for the Montreal Alouettes in 2020, the TSL Conquerors from 2020 to 2021, moving on back to the USFL for the Tampa Bay Bandits in 2022, the Memphis Showboats in 2023, the New Orleans Breakers in 2024 that were shifted into the Memphis Showboats. His career in the USFL, he has 52 receptions, 589 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It's pretty impressive for old Vinny Papale. It's pretty nice. So it's pretty cool that you are, a kid, 10 years old. Your dad has a Disney movie that comes out, story about him during his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, and played by Mark Wahlberg, by the way, too. And now you are doing things in the UFL, from the USFL to the UFL to potentially your own Disney movie. No, I'm just kidding. But it would be great if that actually came into fruition. Now back to this right here for the Memphis Showboats, okay? So that again, they have 5 players that were all USFL selections in the previous year. Moving on to the St. Louis Battlehawks, Anthony Beck led the highest drawing team in the XFL to a 7-3 record, but missed the XFL playoffs after losing a tiebreaker to the defunct Seattle Sea Dragons. It's no surprise the Battlehawks are wildly popular in St. Louis, a city that has been home to pro football for more than 100 years, dating back to the formation of the St. Louis All-Stars, okay? The St. Louis All-Stars. 100 years in pro football. Come on now. Get hype. Get hype with me. Pro football, get hype. You can do it. There's pro football in St. Louis. And if you are not hype, you are failing the game. And you know as much as I know that.
I think I got my swagger back. Oh.
Come on in, Devo.
Oh, my brother, testify.
And if you're looking for shenanigans and football meets together because I'm by myself today,
You got the right one, baby.
you're in the right place. Because we're going to talk some football with some shenanigans. And The Rock layeth the smack it down. There is so much going on in this episode today. Now back to the program. Okay. So looking at St. Louis football, looking at where we're at, former Battlehawks quarterback A.J. McCarron threw for 2,150 yards and 24 touchdowns last season and saw his efforts rewarded with a spot on the Cincinnati Bengals 2023 roster. He leaves a hole to fill. And not really, because if you haven't been paying attention, A.J. McCarron's back for the St. Louis Battlehawks to contend for that number one quarterback position on the team. The Battlehawks also exited the first dispersal draft without 2023 XFL Special Teams Player of the Year, Darius Shepard. But the addition of XFL Defensive Player of the Year, Peter Gosh, man, you guys there are some names that have been transitioning over the UFL. I wonder if that's what hurts some of these players in the NFL. Like, the announcers can't say their names, so they're like, yeah, you might be talented, but you're going to have to go somewhere else. That would be messed up, because even though I can't say it, I don't see a reason why some of these players with some of these stats and the fact that they're defensive players of the year and they can't make it over there, especially when he recorded 8.5 tackles for loss, including 7.5 sacks in 10 games last year. Imagine if he was doing that in 17 games, those stats would be more like, 13.5 to 14.5 for the tackles for loss, and maybe like 11.5 sacks in 17 games, which is still pretty respectable. Okay. Wideout Hakeem Butler will no doubt be one of the quarterback's top targets after recording 51 catches for 599 yards with 8 touchdowns last season. He was joined by Jacour Pearson, who led both leagues in catches for 60 and receiving yards at 670 receiving yards. Okay. So looking at that, you got some pretty respectable weapons if you're A.J. McCarron on this team. The number of all XFL players selected for this team is 5. And I'm going to break this down for you very, very carefully. Now, looking at this right now, you got this guy's name that I'm still having a hard time with saying. And I'm going to do my best to say it. Pita Talmo-Pinu. I probably butchered that name really, really badly. But again, I try my best. He's the linebacker out of Utah. You got Hakeem Butler, the wide receiver out of Iowa State. Jacour Pearson, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. Steven Gonzalez, the offensive guard from Penn State. And Mike Panusic is the center from Michigan State. Now, another person that, again, we want to make sure that we give enough credit for is the St. Louis Battlehawks quarterback, A.J. McCarron, because last year he was the XFL passing touchdowns leader. He was the XFL completion percentage leader. He was the XFL passer rating leader. He's a 3-time BCS national champion with his days that he spent in Alabama, as he won in 2010, 2012, and 2013. Okay, so he is no slouch when it comes to how he performs in big games. Especially, you got to look at his NFL career statistics. He doesn't have terrible numbers. I mean, for somebody with the numbers like this, it's very, very surprising he didn't get more opportunities in the league of the NFL, considering that he's been there, been available for 10 seasons now. And he spent the first 4 seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals from 2014 to 2017. In 2018, he was on the Buffalo Bills practice squad. Wasn't even good enough to be on the roster. But he was for the Oakland Raiders. He was on their roster in 2018 following that. Houston Texans had him for 2019 and 2020 as their backup. The Atlanta Falcons had him in 2021. But in 2022, he did not play professional football as he was then brought into the XFL as it was, reborn to start the 2023 season. After his performance last year for the XFL's St. Louis Battlehawks, he was given another opportunity to be the backup in Cincinnati. He was a third string behind Joe Burrow. And their other quarterback they had that did some pretty good things, their backup quarterback filled in for them, but he was third string behind Mr. W right there. But looking at his numbers right here, he has 179 pass attempts in the NFL, okay? 113 of those passing completions, 63.1 completion percentage, 6 touchdowns to 3 interceptions out of 1,192 passing yards with a passer rating of 86.6. And you want to tell me that's not good enough to be a backup quarterback in the league? Get some type of opportunity at all? Yet he goes to the XFL in 2023 and puts up the numbers that he did, being the XFL passing touchdowns leader, being the XFL completion percentage leader, being the XFL passer rating leader. And you want to tell me this guy ain't good enough to be a QB2 in the NFL? Hopefully, if the man puts up similar numbers in the UFL this year, he at least gets an opportunity to be the second string quarterback in the NFL after that. You tell me here in the comments, whether you're watching this thing live or syndicated, you got to tell me, what do you think? Do you agree with me that he agrees he at least should be a QB2 in the league? Because I think so. Let me know here in the comments. Guys, this has been an extended opening drive as we have 2 more teams that we're going to break down right here. Actually, yeah, we got 2 more teams we're going to break down. Michigan Panthers. Along with Panthers coach Mike Nolan, Michigan will look to defensive end Breland Speaks and former Biletnikoff Award winner Corey Coleman, and all-USFL tailback Reggie Corbin, and all-USFL safety Shalom Luani to act as leaders on their respective sides of the ball after a 4-6 season in 2023. While the Panthers do not return the 2023 USFL Defensive Player of the Year Frank Ginda, the addition of former Oklahoma linebacker Deshaun White and all-USFL linebacker Gerard Fernandez gives them ample opportunity to maintain the position of strength. Okay. So again, you lost Frank Ginda, but you added Deshaun White, Gerard Fernandez. So you lost one, but you gained 2 because those linebackers are no slouches. So look at the amount of all USFL players that were selected for this team were 5. You got to give it to Breland Speaks, defensive end out of Ole Miss. Corey Coleman, the wide receiver out of Baylor. Reggie Corbin, the running back out of Illinois. Danny Etling, the quarterback out of LSU. And Devin Gray, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati. I mean, these are some big names that I think can contribute to the Michigan Panthers. Will they be better than their 4-6 record from last year? I don't know. But they're coming over to a new league with new challenges. So if they go 4-6 or better, I think it was a successful year coming from an old league. If they are worse, then I don't think so. Then I think that they took a step back, and this is all for nothing. For year 1 at least. But this is just year 1. So you tell me what you think here in the comments, because you guys are being very, very quiet right now. And last but not least, the number 8 team that I want to talk about one more time is the San Antonio Brahmas. Wade Phillips' Brahmas managed to win just 3 of their 10 games in 2023. And again, he was not the head coach of the team. But the 2024 roster already looks like one that can compete for a playoff spot. The Brahmas already have a strong core with former Wisconsin and Notre Dame quarterback Jack Cohn, the Kansas City State wideout Cade Warner, and Ohio State defensive tackle Teron Vincent forming the backbone of their 2024 team. Cohn passed for 3,150 yards with 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions in 2021 on a Notre Dame team that finished 11-2. The number of all XFL players from this team that were selected are 4. And they give you Cody Latimer, the IU out of Indiana, inside. Alex Millette, the center out of Marshall. Drew Beasley, the defensive end from Michigan State, and Jordan Williams, the linebacker from Baylor. Those are your all-pro selections right there, ladies and gentlemen. And with that being said, we've gone through the opening drive of this show. Let's go ahead and take it to our first commercial break, and when we come on back, we'll see some things upon the horizon that we've got for this Gridiron Scoop that I'm looking forward to breaking down for you. We'll see you here after this first commercial break.
All right, let's go. We got trips right at 42, 989 on two. Ready? Break.
We're just getting started. Total Football Talk will return right after this.
Everything Boston. I love you morons. New Kids on the Block, New Edition.
Dear whatever the law firm is. Sincerely, the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Go yourself again, Jason.
Ready to hang with some fellas who know football? Let's ride. LC Muscles 28.
I think they're the most overrated defense in the league.
Steel Sermon.
We did not trail for a single second.
Tiny Tim.
McCarthy is a bonehead.
A Pistol 90.
I'm going with my boys. Fins up, baby!
Get ready for the Four Horsemen of Pick'ems. Every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central on YouTube. Poppy J.
You got the option to cry for the government. You got the option to protest. You got the option to keep buying. But this is also an option.
Wise El Jefe.
We're the first tech geeks. We're the first gamers. We're the first everything. Everything. Like Gen X's, we are the ones.
BS3 Network proudly presents the crew from the New York boroughs who never wants that smoke. Nah, they want that fire. Poppy J and Wise El Jefe. Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Check your local listings for your viewing and listening pleasure.
Welcome back to Total Football Talk as we have gone through the opening drive and our first commercial break. And no, we do not have an appearance from Tiny Tim, but that commercial is still awesome. So now that we are back, we've gone through the opening drive, we're going to go ahead and take this into the Gridiron Scoop, talk about what's on the topics at bay for the Gridiron Scoop. So looking at the old scoop now. Ex-Rams defensive tackle Aaron Donald feels complete after 10-year career. What else does Aaron Donald have to prove on the field? Well, I mean, after 10 years, this man has a Super Bowl championship. He doesn't have to prove anything, in my opinion. He has, there's people that have retired at his age that some people would say is a little bit premature. I mean, you look at Barry Sanders retiring, in 1998 after 10 seasons, doing what he did, it's pretty close to what Barry Sanders did back in 1998, except for Aaron Donald, I believe, played one more season than Barry did. I mean, Barry came out in 1989 and retired in 1998. So, yeah, that's only 9 years, but that's actually 10 NFL seasons that he played. So, looking at what he did, 1989 to 1998 was Barry Sanders. You look at Aaron Donald, who in his career played from 2014 to 2023, 10 seasons, just like Barry Sanders. 3-time NFL Defensive Player of the Year from 2017, 2018, and 2020. NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2014. Again, Super Bowl champion with the Rams as well. 8-time first team All Pro from 2015 to 2021 consecutively, and in his final year in the 2023 season, making the first team as well. A 10-time Pro Bowler in all 10 years of the league from 2014 to 2023. The man's got a Deacon Jones Award as well in 2018. The NFL 2010s All-Decade Team alumni is Aaron Donald. The PFWA All-Rookie Team in 2014, he made it to. And that was all of his NFL accomplishments. We won't even get to the college ones because he's got some college accolades there as well. So looking at what he did, is there anything else to prove for him? There's nothing else he needed to prove because he did it all. And that's why after 10 years in a Super Bowl championship, I think that had the Rams not won it back in 2020, there's a potential you see Aaron Donald for another year or two. But considering that the type of abuse and that position that he plays on that side takes, you have to look at the defensive tackles and wonder like why they only play 12, 14, maybe 15 years if they're lucky at a high level. Aaron Donald probably felt this last year that he was losing a step. And even though he was good enough to make another 10th consecutive Pro Bowl and an 8th All-Pro team after missing the previous season and he missed his rookie year and he missed the 2022 season. Other than that, he was an All-Pro throughout the entirety of his NFL career. So thinking about maybe he had to struggle a little bit to get to the point to where he was considered for the Pro Bowl and for the All-Pro selection, probably didn't want to put his body through that again. Maybe thinking, I might be able to get another Pro Bowl, another All-Pro for another year or two. But the amount of work that you have to put into it, just to accomplish it is a lot. That's something that not many people realize out here. Ones that are fans of sports that maybe not played it at a certain level, okay? You practice as hard as you play. And you have to practice a lot more than you play. Because the only way you will get the results out there on the field, and no matter what sport you're playing, is if you put the work in behind the scenes. It's just like going to the gym and working out, something that I'm getting a little bit better about, but still have a way to go through. When it comes to Aaron Donald, he didn't have days off like you and I could take sometimes because we're not paid as professional athletes. That is not our job. When you are a professional athlete, the reasons why they get the contracts they do and the stupid amount of money they do is because they put in a stupid amount of time in training and practicing and preparation for the game. In the NFL, yes, they only have 17 games in a season and a few games in the playoffs. At most, if you win it all and you play every single game that year, you have 21 games to play in. But the amount of practice in between all of those games, from springtime, which we're about to get up to soon with OTAs, and then you got training camp in the summer leading through August with preseason. It's a lot. It's a grueling time. Even though the season is pretty long in some aspects of going for about 6 months between preseason, the regular season, and the playoffs, you got to add another 3 to 4 months to that in training. And you get maybe 2.5 months off. And that's if you are a successful team that goes all the way through. Like, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. The amount of free time that they have had over the course of the past 5 years, 2.5 months, and you are back in the grind all over again. So that's why you see old T-Dog Travis Kelce out there going on his vacation and stuff right now. There's videos popping up on YouTube I was seeing this morning that, I would enjoy that vacation too, because as successful as that team is, you don't get but so many opportunities to go out there and live your life. So That's why these players get paid the amount of money that they do, because they got to get the back end money from all those months that they weren't playing, but they were training, that they don't get paid for up front. So looking at that as a whole, I would say Aaron Donald accomplished everything he needed to on the field, and that was a good question posed by my man Cole Johnson. So with that, let's move on to the next one. So our next question at hand right here is the NFL officials back proposed hip drop tackle rule change amid protest. Should the hip drop tackle be banned from the NFL? I don't think so, because literally after seeing what everybody has been talking about over the past week or so with this whole hip drop tackle thing, what are you going to be able to do after that? Like, if you can't hip drop them, it's basically you're going to be riding them to the ground. Like, you tackle them from the back and you just ride them down, like ride them cowboy type of deal. Like, like you are, what is that word? I'm looking for, like a rancher or something doing a rodeo. You're out there on a rodeo, you tackle and then you ride them on down to the ground. No, I do not like this whole hip drop tackle change. It is not for me. I'm not a fan of this, and I hope that they go back and think about this, even though it doesn't look like it. It looks like we are absolutely screwed with losing the hip drop tackle. And a topic that I was hoping to talk about with my guy Cole Johnson today, but unfortunately, if you watch the beginning of the show, you will understand that he is not here for the next few weeks. The NFL owner is set to vote on making Cal McNair principal owner of the Texans. Should the Texans be up for sale with Cal McNair set to take over? You know, that's a really good question. A question that, again, I was really hoping that my man Cole Johnson could be here to talk about, because I'll be honest, when it comes to the situations within the Houston Texans organization, he's the best person to talk about it. Kind of like how they say I'm the better one to talk about, like, Washington Commander stuff, just because I'm more inclined with it. You know, Cal McNair, as of today, 45 minutes ago, was approved at the NFL's annual league meeting Tuesday as the Texans chairman and CEO. Was approved to be the franchise's new principal owner. So when it comes to that, when you got old Jerry Jones, endorsing this situation right here, you got buddies in high places, not low places, in high places. You got buddies there that are excited about you being the sole owner of this team. And with Cole's question of should the Texans be up for sale with Cal McNair set to take over, I don't think so. You know, I think if he is a fan of the game and especially likes to see investments become bigger investments, and seeing what this 2023 Houston Texans team did, there's a good chance that he sticks around, in my opinion, because he wants to build this team up to be even more to be more of a cash cow, the best way I could put it at this moment, and make it to where he can get the most out of it if he does decide to sell it. Because if you sell it now and opposed to 2 to 5 years from now, it's going to be worth more money in 2 to 5 years. You get more of a capital return. So if I were Cal McNair, I would say no. This is just more of a move to say he is the final boss. Up next, we have the Chiefs set to trade cornerback L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans. So when you look at what L'Jarius Sneed has done for this Kansas City Chiefs team, you know, being a part of this team, this guy's only 27 years old. He was born in 1997, so I can trust him. If you've been watching our program, and you'll understand where exactly I'm going with that right there. L'Jarius Sneed, two-time Super Bowl champions, been with the Kansas City Chiefs since 2020, arriving the year after they won their first one with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid together. Now he's a two-time Super Bowl champion, winning the past back-to-backs. In his career, he has 303 total tackles, 40 pass deflections, and 10 interceptions. The rumor is that L'Jarius Sneed is looking, maybe not necessarily looking, but the fact that he is now newly acquired by the Titans. The question that Cole posed to me was, what type of trouble or what type of money was Sneed asking for the Chiefs to be willing to trade L'Jarius Sneed? Okay. He had to have been asking a good amount of money. And honestly, based on the way he played the past 2 seasons, he's deserving of a pay bump. I can't get mad at him. However, based on Cole's questioning right here, I think that he was probably asking a little bit too much outside of the box, outside the norm of what somebody of his caliber should be getting paid, which is why he was getting traded to a team known for overpaying their players and getting lackluster results. So L'Jarius Sneed goes from the Kansas City Chiefs to now the Tennessee Titans in a move that was made final today, that he now has a 4-year, $76 million contract. Oh, and my apologies, $76.4 million contract is what he has at stake here for the Tennessee Titans. So if he's getting paid that kind of money, then that means that he was asking somewhat in the ballpark of that money in Kansas City or more. And you're already giving Patrick Mahomes $500 million, $500 million for 10 seasons. He is still not even halfway through that contract yet. And that is easily $50 million a year, even though some of that is in back pay mode, very similar to Shohei Ohtani in baseball, but also to an extent to where it can still keep the Chiefs competitive in free agency, in trades, but also in situations like this to avoid a player from going to free agency. You basically had a year left on the deal, but you had to move him so that way you can get some type of compensation for him, and that's exactly what happened in this case with L'Jarius Sneed. Good luck to you on a team that absolutely sucks, and you will watch your Kansas City Chiefs in a very similar way that Tyreek Hill has for the past couple seasons, winning championships without you. Next on the docket, we have the Rams quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo says he, quote unquote, messed up, end quote unquote. Exemption leading to PED suspension. I should have used the quote. Let me try that again. Let's try this entire thing one more time. Jimmy G says that he, quote, messed up, close quote. I can't do it as good as Cole, but I'm trying over here. I'm trying. This is me by myself out here today. I'm trying. It's tough, but I'm trying. Now, looking at this, what message does Garoppolo's impending suspension send to the NFL? Well, it should send more of a message to just the NFL, but to athletes, to fans, to literally everyone around the world. Don't take PEDs and still suck. In all seriousness now, you shouldn't be taking PEDs at all. And especially if you're an athlete. You got steroids are supposed to be helping people recover from injuries and surgeries and this, that, and the other, okay? It is not supposed to be used for a performance-enhancing drug, even though it has been for decades, for probably since before they were even caught for them because they didn't have the testing for it. So you look at some of these players who were probably big time in the 60s and 70s that are inducted in the Hall of Fame. I guarantee you that whether it's the NFL or the Major League Baseball, whatever sport, there's a sport out there. There is one sport out there that has elected somebody to a Hall of Fame that has used PEDs and gotten away with it. Okay. I don't know who. We can speculate all day long, but what I will say here is when it comes to Jimmy G, it was an absolute stupid decision to take PEDs and still suck. I've never in my 37 years heard of anybody taking PEDs and getting worse. It is not a thing. It is not a thing that we are common to see. But apparently we saw it in 2023. So next up, we have how to catch and what to know about Netflix's new NFL series Receiver. What would you like to know about Davante Adams with this documentary? Well, when it comes to this, I like where they went from quarterback to receiver with this, even though there's still supposed to be a quarterback series featuring other quarterbacks outside of what we saw last year. I think the biggest reason why the biggest thing I want to see from Davante Adams is I want to see him talk more into the breakdown of what happened in Green Bay and why he left. I want to see, the breakdown and what happened with Derek Carr and him and his connection with the Las Vegas Raiders and why it didn't work out. I want to see what his thoughts are on, losing Josh McDummy as the head coach last year. And then, having somewhat of a mediocre but somewhat successful year with the Raiders to end that 2023 season to the point to where they were able to, retain Antonio Pierce, even though there were some rumblings in the dark about some other coaching prospects that they were looking at this offseason. They made the right move because they screwed up years back when they let go of Rich Bisaccia after what he did taking over for, John Gruden. This situation they got right by retaining Antonio Pierce. We'll see that more in depth this year if he actually does the right things to continue to be the head coach after the 2024 season. But I like Antonio Pierce as the leader for this Las Vegas Raiders team. When it comes to Davante Adams, though, like I said, I basically want to get more of an understanding of what was the breakdown in Green Bay. What was the situation that led to, him and Josh McDummy and, Derek Carr not working out. And then after that, how he felt with everything that was going on last year with losing the head coach and then basically throwing stuff at the wall until it sticks to get to where they did last year, to get to the point to where they did and having somewhat of a relatively successful year. So that's what I want to know from Davante Adams coming from this documentary called Receiver. And now, what's next for Odell Beckham Jr.? Here's 5 options for the veteran superstar free agent. Where does Odell Beckham Jr. best fit? So I've thought about this a little bit more throughout the night, and Odell Beckham Jr. is not what he used to be with the Giants, of course. But he did give a spark to the Ravens last year in certain points to where he's not completely washed up, okay? But looking at the top 5 teams, I would say he's got a pretty good chance of making an impact too. You got to look at, again, even though he's been there, you got to look at the New York Giants. Even though, he left the way he did and he's been kind of a diva throughout his NFL career, the Giants need help at wide receiver. They really, really, really need help at wide receiver. If Odell Beckham Jr. goes back there, it would be a major upgrade for them. And that's only one of 5 teams that I have in mind of somewhere that Odell Beckham Jr. could go back and actually make an impact and not be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, like a slot receiver. I don't think he's good enough to be the star wide receiver that he was years ago when he was with the Giants, but he could still be a number 1, just not to the caliber of what he was back then. Because again, he's had some injuries and just, bad luck catch up to him. I just don't think that, he's going to be the star-studded player that he was. But yes, a reunion in the Big Apple. The Giants have a needed wide receiver, like I said, and could use a spark on the offense after the departure of running back Saquon Barkley. Okay. Then you got to look at the fact that in 2016 in a Giants uniform, Beckham became the fastest player in NFL history to reach both 200 career receptions and 4,000 career receiving yards. I mean, that's a feat it's tough to achieve, but you got to give the man credit where it's due. Maybe he wants to end his career in a Giants uniform. The Giants won't be receiving the 2014 NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year and 3-time Pro Bowl version of Beckham again. However, Beckham would bring a little excitement to a dull offense and some nostalgia to the Giants fan base. The Giants haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver in a season since Beckham left after the 2018 season. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, a 5-year drought of watching dumpster Pelican receivers play for the Giants. They are the number 3 dumpster Pelican in the wide receiving core that, even though I'm going to play it one more time, you understand the one standing on top of that Walmart bag over to the left-hand side, that's the dumpster Pelican version of the Giants that you have been watching for the past 5 seasons. Now, the next best place I would say for Odell Beckham Jr. to go besides the Giants would be the Steelers. The Steelers lost out on Mike Williams, and they could pivot to Beckham. Beckham doesn't have the big catch radius or downfield ability of Williams, but he does have reliable hands and would bring the veteran experience to a rather young, very, very young Pittsburgh Steeler receiving core. I mean, look at just that in itself. I mean, you can't get upset at that. New Steelers quarterback Russell Wilson thrives during the off-script plays, and Wilson's style would benefit him. Looking at all of this, Wilson's style absolutely would benefit Beckham at this point of his career. Beckham knows how to get open, especially when plays break down. Beckham would be a good complement to the Steelers' top receiver, George Pickens. You have a 1A and a 1B. Or, he's past his prime maybe a little bit. We'll give him a 2. Okay. But to go up with George Pickens, and you got Najee Harris, and you got Freiermuth as your tight end. You got some options over there in Pittsburgh. And then, if it doesn't even work out with Russell Wilson, you still have Justin Fields that you can develop potentially. Because the Bears let him down. Oh, they absolutely did. And even if some of you were out there saying,
hell to the no, to the no, 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 no. Hell no, no, to the no, no.
Then you're only doing this to yourself.
That was a lie.
And in all reality,
we gotta pause that.
Absolutely. So now, that's only 2 of 3 places where Odell Beckham Jr. could go. I would say the third option would be Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs would be a good option for Odell Beckham Jr. for a variety of reasons. As a member of the Chiefs, Beckham would be able to play loose and free with very little pressure. Patrick Mahomes' top targets are tight end Travis Kelce, wide receiver Rashee Rice, and likely newly acquired wideout Marquise Brown, old Hollywood Brown. Beckham might be the 4th passing catch option in Kansas City, but Mahomes picked teams apart with short and intermediate passes on the way to a 3rd Super Bowl title last season. Beckham is the best running short and immediate routes. That's his best game right there, is running those short and immediate routes. Excuse me. So looking at that, you have to say he would fit in pretty well over there in Kansas City. So far, 3 out of the 5 spots that I have him potentially going to are the New York Giants, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Kansas City Chiefs. And number 4 would be a team that you wouldn't expect, but he was there before, and you got to give him credit where it's due. Is, he has a Super Bowl championship as a result of his time with this team. That is the Los Angeles Rams. Even though he was on the IR during the Super Bowl, he still helped contribute towards getting the team to the Super Bowl. And the Los Angeles Rams would be the 4th team I would select for him to go to. In 2021 with the Rams, Beckham had some vintage moments during the team's Super Bowl run. He produced 21 catches, 288 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 4 postseason games with the Rams. He had the first touchdown in Super Bowl 56 and was on his way to a big game until a devastating knee injury that happened during the game. Rams coach Sean McVay always spoke fondly of Beckham, and the door could be open for him to return to Los Angeles as a 3rd receiving option behind Amari Cooper. Well, not Amari Cooper because he didn't play with him anymore. The 3rd receiving option behind Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, because Puka Nacua definitely broke out in this past season, and I look at him to potentially break out even more as the time unravels. And, that's only 4 teams. There's a 5th team that could potentially pick him up, and a team that is definitely very explosive on offense. Beckham reportedly visited the Dolphins last Thursday, so there's interest on both sides. Miami is led by speedsters Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the outside, but they don't have a reliable receiver who runs underneath routes. That could be Beckham's potential role as the Dolphins' 3rd wideout. Hill had 119 catches and Waddle caught 72 in 2023. Miami's 3rd leading wide receiver is Braxton Berrios, who had just 27 catches. And you know as much as I know that he would be a major upgrade, Odell Beckham would, over Braxton Berrios. There's not trying to say he's a slouch or anything, but that's just how I feel when it comes to the receiving options over there in Miami. So now that we've gone through that one right there, we got one more topic before we head to our last commercial break of the show, and that is Larry David says he asked Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to remove goalposts from the UFL. And the question posed to me is, how should the UFL respond to Larry David's request? I think that The Rock should pop up in front of his face and tell him this:
You should know your role and shut your mouth.
But he should start it off first with,
Let me talk to you.
Larry David, you want to come to The Rock's face and tell The Rock that he should remove the goalpost from the UFL.
You should know your role and shut your mouth.
You really think that I'm just going to waltz out onto my field and
Delete! 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 Delete!
the goalpost? I mean, come on now. Damn! I can see it now. This just in, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has removed the goalpost as suggested by Larry David. The world is now in shambles. What do you think would happen if that news telecast provided that insight? Do you think that The Rock would follow that up with,
Acknowledge me?
do you think that people would say,
Now, that is absurd.
or do you flat out think that
Ain't nobody care. Who? Who cares? Ain't nobody care.
Are you totally?
Surprise, motherfucker.
I'm not. But when it comes to this topic right here, Larry David suggesting to remove the goalpost, I said this.
What?
When I first saw this and read this, I literally said,
What?
Followed by the survey saying that, because who wants to remove the goalposts from the UFL to where you have to go for 1s and 2s and 3s all the time? But even then, on 4th down, when you're in possession of the ball, you have no option. If you're in field goal range to kick it and get some points, you literally have to go for it on 4th down. And I think that's literally what Larry David's trying to say. He wants to see more of going for it on 4th down, because we're seeing it in the NFL more, especially if you're covering the Detroit Lions or a fan of the Detroit Lions. You're seeing a lot of that team going for 2. But Larry David's a comedian. Larry David, in the past 10 years, is known more for playing Anthony Fauci on Saturday Night Live than actually doing anything relative with his career.
You can't handle the truth.
Especially when it comes to professional sports. What does Larry David have to do with any decisions made within professional football?
Oh, my brother, testify.
If you're looking for shade on Larry David, then
You got the right one, baby.
And if you like the man and you're throwing a fit right now,
You can't handle the truth.
had a little lazy finger for a second. Took a little second for that little thing to come on out. Took a little second, and I was totally
Surprise, motherfucker.
when it happened. But now we're back, okay? We told Larry David to know his role and shut his mouth. But to me, as wholesome of the game of football as it is, if you take away the goalpost, I think your ratings will take a major. I don't know about you, but sometimes I like to see a 50-plus yard field goal. It's tough. It's tough to go for it on 4th and 1 and 4th and 2 and 4th and 4, whatever you want to say. But it's tough to kick a 50-mile-an-hour field goal or a 50-yard field goal, especially in the cold. Right now, as the weather gets warmer, it might be a little bit easier. But the type of ball they're kicking and passing in the UFL, it's a little bit different than the NFL's ball, okay? So watching field goals from 50 yards, you're not going to want to be 4th and 6 and have to go for it every time. Well, yeah, you could punt the ball. But if you're within field goal range, but you have to punt the ball because you don't want to go for it on 4th and 6, it's who are you going to be calling about that? You're not going to be calling Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You're going to be sending hate mail. You're going to be sending absolute hate mail to Larry David, because it is his fault if you get put in this situation. You blame Larry David. You don't blame The Rock. Even though you should blame The Rock, because he's the one who made the decision. Now that we have closed the Gridiron Scoop opening drive, we're going to take our final commercial break. And when we come back, we've got to break down the preview of these UFL games that we have for this weekend, while we still have some airwave time today on Comey Media and Sartoba Media. I'll see you here in a couple minutes.
Coming up next, the featured attractions. This is Total Football Talk. Comey Media Incorporated. Creating content magic in the real world.
This little right here. Look at the inside of these cakes. Now, when you bite into it, just as I demonstrated while you were talking at the beginning of your discussion right there, I could taste the drugs inside of this cake, Sick. I could taste the addiction within the cream filling of this cake right here, to where they not only us with that cake right there, but they made an ice cream out of it. They made an ice cream out of it. A 1-pint Christmas tree cake ice cream. Look at that little just smile up there. Look, she is up to no good on there. Look at that. Look at that smile on there, Sick. She knows that she got you. Got him is what's in her mind right now.
Acknowledge me.
Look at that little smile right there. She's up to no good.
D. Willie in the evening. Thursdays at 11:15 p.m. Eastern, 10:15 p.m. Central. Exclusively on Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, look. Hey, stop playing games. Y'all already know. Go ahead and toss him some Willie Bucks. Ain't nobody playing around. $, D Willie 87. Go ahead, hit him up on the Cash App, and go ahead and give him some Willie Bucks. Look at Drew looking stoic, ladies and gentlemen. Stoic on that $10 bill. So go ahead, slide my man over some Willie Bucks, and we good. That's all I'm saying. We good. How about some Willie Bucks?
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
If you're looking for a sports program that gives you the flavor.
Washington Commanders? Really?
This whole thing stinks to high heaven.
That pulls no punches.
Thuggish act by a thuggish actor.
That gives you some humor.
Praise everything LeBron does and never criticize it.
If you want a show that gives you good times, then this is that show. BS3 Network proudly presents.
I am Cole Johnson, and welcome to
Cole Sports with a Z. Every Friday on Patreon, and every Saturday on YouTube, Spreaker, and all other outlets.
Welcome back to Total Football Talk. As we've gone through the first two segments, we've got one more, and that is the featured attractions that we have to talk about for this upcoming weekend. And with the games that we have for week 1 of the UFL season, we've got 4 games that we got to talk about. There's 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. We have the Birmingham Stallions taking on the defending XFL champions, Arlington Renegades, this Saturday, 1 p.m. kickoff on Fox. When you look at this game right here, you look at the Arlington Renegades. Of course, they were 4-6 last year, but they are the defending champions. Again, going up against the Birmingham Stallions, who were 8-10 or 8-2 for the previous year for the USFL's season. And then you got to look at what they did all the way on up to winning their championship in the previous year. So it's like battle of 2 champs. Could this be the beginning of what we see in the playoffs? Could we see this matchup in the playoffs? It's very potential. Very big potential when you have an 8-2 team. Depending on if the Arlington Renegades can step things up in this matchup, I think that they have a really good chance. I mean, the Birmingham Stallions can step things up because, again, USFL to XFL competition, it's kind of like a checks and balances. It's a little bit better on one team than on the other. And I think the Birmingham Stallions, based on what they did in the USFL and how the Arlington Renegades kind of squeaked in there with that 4-6 record, we could see a game that could go to the away side this upcoming Saturday. We could see a potential Birmingham Stallions upset over the Arlington Renegades on the road. And I'm saying upset because there are people out there who are looking more into the fact that Arlington Renegades were the XFL champions last year and how they think that that team is automatically going to win at home this Saturday. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. The Arlington Renegades can win at home. I mean, they do have a pretty good team, overall that, again, won the championship last year. They've got a stupendous head coach in Bob Stoops is what I meant to say. But yes, I'm in WrestleMania mode because, again, last year was the most stupendous WrestleMania of all time. And now we have the stupendous Bob Stoops coaching again for the Arlington Renegades, second year in a row. I've already talked about how decorated that man's career was because we talked about it earlier in the show. Even though we got some quiet people out there in the chats. We got somebody watching on Comey Media. We got somebody watching on Sertoma Media's YouTube channel. We got some people watching over there on Twitter, formerly known as X, or X, formerly known as Twitter. You can say it however way you want to. We got quite a few people watching on X right now, actually. And we got people watching on Twitch. So if you got some thoughts on this, or maybe you just like seeing the entertainment and the shenanigans mixed with the total football talk, and you're not sure because you're learning from me about the UFL and getting ready for this weekend's contest because you haven't paid too much attention to it, which is okay because there's other stuff in life besides football. That's why you're watching right now to get ready for football this Sunday. And shout out to Cole Johnson. I miss you because this is very different doing this by myself. But hopefully in 4 weeks, we'll be reunited and it feels so good. Now, back to the show. Because whoever on Kobe Media that was just watching just dropped on out. Now, back to the show. All right, so looking at this game right here, I think that the Birmingham Stallions are going to beat the Arlington Renegades this Saturday. That's going to be my prediction. And if they win, it's going to be by 3 to 7 points. It's not going to be anything major. It's going to be a pretty close game. That's what I have as my prediction for this Sunday's contest or Saturday's contest.
Hey, who's giving them the business?
That's what I meant to click. So the next game that we have to cover on Saturday is the one that follows this. Is the 4:00 p.m. kickoff. The St. Louis Battlehawks take on the Michigan Panthers. The Michigan Panthers, pretty lackluster last year with the way they performed, 4-6. St. Louis Battlehawks, you could say the way that they started and the way they ended the year was kind of lackluster in comparison to the way that they started the year. But they've retained a lot of good people that they had from the previous team. They've also got A.J. McCarron back, who was leading the XFL in 3 different categories in passing last year. Excuse me. So, looking at this as a whole, I think the St. Louis Battlehawks are going to win this game this Saturday. It is not going to be as close as the game before that. I think that they will win by at least 10 points. It could be a double-digit victory right here for the St. Louis Battlehawks. I could absolutely be incorrect because they could have probably brought in some other pieces. It will display, similar talents to what they had for the Battlehawks last year, but on the Michigan Panther side. But I'm not seeing it. I am not hype about it. I'm not going to put too much energy into saying otherwise. I think the St. Louis Battlehawks win this game by 10, and I will not be surprised if they win by more.
Hey, who's giving them the business?
Now, moving to Sunday afternoon, the noon kickoff on ESPN, as the previous 2 games on Saturday will be showcased on Fox. The DC Defenders take on the San Antonio Brahmas in San Antonio. For this game right here, considering that the DC Defenders have retained their coaches, they've retained Reggie Barlow, they got Greg Williams back with 3 Gs on defense as their defensive coordinator. I think we got a really good shot at doing something pretty special over there in DC land and seeing something that could be something pretty special over there in DC, where they didn't get it done last year, but they have a potential to get it done this year in the newly formed UFL league coming out of the XFL division. this game is going to be a good game to watch on ESPN as far as what you're going to get from the DC Defenders. I think that the San Antonio Brahmas are going to be a little competitive as well because they've switched some things up over there. They've got, new head coach. They got some new talent over there. They have not been quiet when it came to the dispersal draft and making some moves this past offseason, especially with the top of the chain in coaching. So looking at what they have over there in San Antonio is a much better situation than what they had last year with leadership all the way on down the line to players. So I think that this game, even though I want the DC Defenders to win by a lot of points, I think it's going to be a little bit closer than anticipated. So I'm going to go with the DC Defenders winning by 7, but I can see it being less. I can also see the potential for the San Antonio Brahmas to win the game too, but I'm not going to go that far. I don't want to go against the DC Defenders after having a 9-1 record last year and doing what they did as impressive as they were over there in DC. I think I'm going to stick with the DC Defenders beating the Brahmas, but I like how the Brahmas have improved over this offseason. And I think that, again, it's going to be by about 7 points victory is going to be my guess over there for the DC Defenders.
Who's giving them the business?
And now we are at the final game of the weekend, but also on the same day as the other game I just talked about. It will be on Sunday. It will be a 3 p.m. kickoff on ESPN as another game that's in Texas. The Houston Renegades will be hosting this game as the Memphis Showboats come to town for the first time in the UFL. The Memphis Showboats will be taking on the Houston Renegades. Oh, Cole had a typo on that. My bad, Cole. I'm going to call you out, but the Houston Roughnecks is what it is. So, yeah, the Houston Roughnecks on there is the team that they are going to be hosting in Houston. The Houston Roughnecks are, and they're going to be hosting the Memphis Showboats. Now, looking at what this team did, the Memphis Showboats did last year, they were 5-5 and last in the South Division of the USFL. Now, the Houston Roughnecks, they were 7-3 in the South, but you got to keep in mind the majority of their team was retained from the Houston Gamblers over there in the South Division of the USFL. So they are not the exact team that they once were in that time frame. So looking at everything as a whole, if I were to break down both teams right here between the Memphis Showboats and the formerly known as now the Houston Roughnecks, but, before looking at what they did as the Houston Gamblers, I would have to say that the team that has the best start to the game is going to win this game. And it's tough for me to determine that now on a Tuesday before this game even gets here to Sunday. It's 5 days away. It's also tough when the XFL or UFL is very different in their preparation for their season than in the NFL or even in the CFL, where you would see, scrimmages or preseason games for like the NFL. Okay. We don't get a lot of televised stuff like that with the XFL and the USFL. It's basically, we got to go off of last year's stuff in addition to what additions they've made during the offseason via trade, via free agency, via draft. Okay. And based on what I have seen in this past offseason, when it comes to these two teams right here, this was the toughest game for me to predict out of all 4 games this weekend because there is not enough tape on film. There's not enough tape involved when it comes to watching these two teams and prepping, especially when it comes to offseason stuff. So overall, I'm going to take a wild guess with this game right here. I am not even going to sugarcoat it. But the Houston Roughnecks in this game, I think we're going to get this home win on Sunday, 3:00 against the Memphis Showboats. I am not in the position to give you an actual score on this one just because I, 1, haven't had enough opportunity to dig on it, and 2, this is my best answer I can really give you on that one.
Who's giving them the business?
With that being said, let's go ahead and take this into the post game and get ready to roll on out of here.
Total football talk.
As long as it's one. Oh, that's great. I love it. I hope it actually has recording. Listening to it.
So, everybody, we are now at the point of the show where we're very much at the end talking the post-game stuff. And, this show today has been a little different, again, because I'm by myself. And this is not something that in the past 30 episodes, we had 29 episodes before today. Every single episode before today has been either me and Cole, or me and Kyle Nash, or even Cole and Kyle Nash last week to fill in as I was under the weather and could not make it. I'm not throwing any shade or anything. Like I said, this is something that when it's work related, you got to do what you got to do. And I totally understand that and respect it. But there's not many people out there, at least in our circles, that kind of have the dialogue and the knowledge within UFL and USFL like Cole or myself, and can have the type of conversation back and forth that we do on a regular basis. And for those of you that are still watching on Twitter or Twitch, or even the couple of you on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully it wasn't that bad. Hopefully I did the best I could by myself. This is the longest I have ever been doing a podcast by myself at one time. Like, done like an hour and a half ones, but this one to push almost 2.5 hours was a huge challenge today. I'm not gonna lie, I was not comfortable with it. I didn't even want to do it, to be honest with you. But I think that brought something pretty good out of it. It wasn't terrible, but I missed Cole today. Next week, there are some people out there that I do know that can keep up with us on the UFL and USFL and XFL and all this other stuff. But because of the short notice from yesterday afternoon trying to find somebody, I was unsuccessful with finding somebody to fill in and take my place, as I'm kind of filling in for Cole for the next 4 weeks, as we have 3 more episodes after today to get through until Cole comes back from his basically work trip. We'll just call it that. He's on a work trip right now where basically the hours that he's working are conflicting with what we had planned for this and his other projects. So I think if I'm right, if I'm thinking about this right, I think you can still see him tonight at 8:00 p.m. Eastern time with this Queen and 3 King podcast show. He's got a pretty special announcement. I'm not too sure the effects of what is going on right now, how that will affect with that. But what I can say is, according to him yesterday, is we should see him back in 30 days. So to me, that says that I get through 3 more episodes and I got my dude back. So I miss you, Cole. Thank you again for everything you've done for the slate for today. And I'll take care of it for the next few weeks and the show itself. And hopefully we can get some more people on back in here in the comments, because the faithful TFT tribe, I will take the hit for that today, as I pushed the show back 2.5 hours to start at 11:30, because I figured if I was going to do this by myself, I might as well do it at a comfortable time and get a little bit of extra Z's out here, when I was in my bed earlier this morning. So that's why we started a little bit later today, just for the best. And to be able to go this long and say the things that I was able to say by myself, I think that it was warranted. So other than that, guys, Greatly appreciate you tuning in. And when it comes to finding myself and Cole on the interwebs, you can find Cole right here at flowcode.com/page/host Cole Johnson, which I definitely still need to get on that. But if you want to find me, you can find me here at Cash App /$D Willie, the Instagram, Sertoba_media, Sertoba_media for Twitter. Facebook, there's a lot of code stuff out there, but you can still find me by searching Drew Willingham, along with the other platforms that were mentioned on that show. Now, again, today we started at 11:30, just because of me going by myself. But next week, we should be back to normal time, if not maybe just a tad after, as I do have at least one planned guest to join me next week. There might be a couple different guests here next week, and a rotation of them for the next 2 to 3 weeks, with the potential of me having to do maybe one more episode by myself. But we'll have actual XFL action in that moment. There will be plenty more things to talk about. Today's episode was very challenging, not only with having to do it solo, but mainly because we don't have any actual football action to cover yet, which next week's episode we will, because we got games this weekend. My predictions can be totally wrong when it comes to what I just predicted for this upcoming weekend, and I am totally fine with that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's how it is. You're a person, I'm a person. Well, at least I hope so. I hope you're not like an alien or a robot or something. But you watching this, you make mistakes. I made mistakes. It's part about being human. If I make them, if my only mistakes today are a prediction wrong here or there, and everything else goes okay, I'm cool with that. And speaking of which, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and your boy works a mid shift. I got to get on down the road here soon and get to work. So I only got one more thing left to tell you, and that is, as always, please, without a shadow of a doubt, do whatever you can to stay safe out here in these streets.